welcome to another video where I talk about how I made my Alina Starkov cosplay from the show Shadow and Bone. In the first video I already showed you how I made Alina's black hefter she wears at the winter feet, and this video I'm going to talk about how I made her dress she's wearing underneath and her head jewelry and her necklace. I had to search a while until I found some reference pictures of the dress, but here they are. You can see that it's a floor-length kind of shiny black dress that has a pleated skirt and a top that is gathered at the neckline and at the waist. I started with the skirt since it needs the most fabric. To make a pleated skirt you need two measurements. First, the circumference of your waist, and second, the measurement from your waist to the floor, so you know how long your skirt has to be. You have to multiply the waist measurement by 3 so you have enough fabric to make the pleats. And don't forget to add some seam allowance, either 3 cm or 1 inch. In my case that's 74 cm for the waist, and multiplied by 3 that's 222 cm. Then I add this 3 cm seam allowance and have the final width of 225 cm for the skirt. That equals 88.5 inches. I needed a length of 113 cm. There I added 3 cm seam allowance as well and had the final result of 116 cm or 45 inches. So I marked and cut out a rectangle of 222 cm and 116 cm. And yes, lying next to your fabric is the official way to see if it has the right length. After I cut out the gigantic rectangle, I folded the longer side into pleats. I made a total of 12 pleats, so I made marks every 6 cm or 2.5 inches. Then I folded the pleats. I noticed that Alina's dress has a larger pleat at the front and the other pleats are facing away from it, towards the back. After I pinned down the pleats, I cut out the pieces for the top. I altered my pattern I had for basic top, so I would have enough fabric to gather at the neckline and waist. I also cut out a rectangle for the waistband. It's 6 cm wide and as long as my waist measurements. Once again I added 3 cm seam allowance, so I had the final measurements of 77 cm and 9 cm. Then I cut out the sleeves. I used the same pattern here that I used for the kefta. First, I sewed the sleeves closed and then I made a gathering stitch at the top. Normally you would do it the other way around. I also gathered the top at the waist after I sewed it together at the sides. Sadly, I didn't film that part or where I sewed the skirt or the top to the waistband. I'm sorry. After I also attached the sleeves, I made some bias tape for the cuffs and neckline. When I sewed the bias tape to the neckline, I also encased a ribbon there. I secured it with some stitches near the shoulder seam before I folded over the bias tape. I also added a buttonhole to the center of the bias tape where I pulled out the ribbons and tied them in a tiny little bow. Then I sewed in the zipper. Therefore I sewed the dress closed at the back and placed the zipper facing down above the seam and sewed it down from the left side of the fabric using my zipper foot and my machine. Then I ripped open the seam above my zipper and voila! Now I could already wear the dress. But there was still some work to do. I made some gathering stitches to the cuffs to fit it right to my wrist. But in order to be able to pull it over my hand, I wanted to slit open the sleeve a couple of centimeters. So I enforced the stitches where the slit should end and ripped open the seam. Then I gave it the cuff and fit it to my wrist before I added bias tape there as well. Finally, I added a button and sewed a buttonhole so I could open the cuff. Then I only had to hem the skirt and the dress was done. I absolutely love the fit of this dress because it doesn't restrict my arm movement and it's quite twirly. But since this dress is all black, it's kind of hard to film because the details get lost with the dark color. But here are some close-ups of the neckline, the cuffs, and the waist. And of course, the back. Now to the next part of this video, the jewelry. I used 2 sizes of black pearls, round and angular golden pearls and flat round golden pearls in different sizes. I used 3 combs to pin the jewelry to the wig. I threaded the pearls onto some thin wires and I also used a small golden chain. For the necklace I also needed a clasp. Fortunately, I could easily find some reference pictures for this. I started with the angular golden pearls at the bottom. I took a long piece of wire and threaded on the first row of pearls. Then I added the second rows of pearls, but here I took the other end of the wire and also threaded it through the second row of pearls, but from the opposite side. I continued like this until I had 7 rows of pearls. I repeated the procedure 2 times, but keep in mind that the middle part is slightly smaller. I couldn't find anything that resembled these 5 huge stones the headpiece has, so I made them myself. First I tried to make them out of foam, but that didn't work out so well. But here you can see that the headpiece is slowly taking shape. I remade the stones of clay with the help of my new silicone mold. I pressed a small piece of clay into the teardrop form and smoothed out the back and front with some water. Next I made a teeny tiny ball of clay and put it on top of the teardrop piece. Lastly, I punched in some holes around the edge and around the little ball of clay on top. Then I left the pieces to dry. Back to the pearls. I attached the pieces to each other with the rest of the wires. Then I cut some small pieces from a thicker wire, folded it in half and simply slid it between the golden pearls and left and right from them. Next I made the strings at the top. You can see 2 of them on the left. It's just a row of round golden pearls followed by a bigger black pearl between 2 flat golden pearls. First a smaller, then a bigger one. This pattern is framed by rows of small black pearls. The third string, however, is a little different. I added these rhinestones that were left over from my favorite starfall gown. I cut them apart with some scissors and threaded them onto the wire behind the row of round golden pearls instead of the black pearl. I also threaded on pieces of the golden chain between the pearls. The chains were about 30 centimeters or 12 inches long, but I folded them in half. At the beginning and end of this chain, I added a couple of black pearls, like you can see on the chains at the left. Next was the fiddly task to connect all the pieces I made so far. There are also a couple more pearls at the ends of the angular golden pearls. 2 rows get combined into one except for the top row. The 7 rows of golden pearls become 4 rows of black pearls. The excess wires get twisted around other wires and threaded through the pearls of other pieces to connect them. There's no real science to it. At the ends, I also threaded on some other rhinestones I had left from my starfall gown. The clay had also dried, but before I painted and attached them, I took some ribbon and sewed the edges together, forming a tube. Through the tube, I threaded a thick wire to stabilize it. Then I sewed the jewelry to the ribbon. I added more rhinestones at the edges with hot glue and folded over the edges of the ribbon while also attaching the combs. I also glued a comb at the center back. Like this, the headpiece was almost finished. I only had to paint the clay stones with golden acrylic paint and glue them to some wire, which I twisted around the wire where I threaded on the pearls to attach them. Now I had to style the wig. I had to restyle it several times because I was never satisfied with how the bun turned out. But I kept the braids at the hairline. There are 3 braids on each side that lead to the back of the head. I divided the rest of the hair into 3 parts and braided each of them to make it easier to keep the hair in place. Then I took the middle braid and folded it upward and pinned it in place with some hairpins. Then I took the other braids and arranged them around the middle braid. Everything is fixed with hairpins and a ton of hairspray. Now I could finally add the hairpiece to the wig. The combs make it really easy to attach the pearls to the hair, and they hold the jewelry pretty well. The last thing left is the necklace. It actually follows the same pattern of the strings of the headpiece, and I attached the clay stones like I did with the hairpiece too. I attached the golden chain at the ends of the black pearls and added a clasp. Now everything is ready to wear. This is my all-time favorite cosplay, and I already made so many great memories with it. I met Jessie May Lee and Ben Barnes at Comic-Con, and I also entered my first cosplay contest at a convention, and I actually won second place. Even though making this cosplay was a lot of work, I really want to make another kefta. Maybe Genya's white kefta or a purple Duras kefta for myself. What do you think? Let me know what you would like to see me doing next in the comments. And don't forget to give this video a thumb up if you made it this far. Also, don't forget to check out my first video where I show you how I made the kefta and how Ben Barnes reacted to it when he first saw me at Comic-Con. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I'm Annika from Forge of Asteria, and I see you in my next video. Bye!